Thank you. My talk is called Educational Insights for QA from your folks' Finnish educational system to mobile learning. A few words about me. I started doing JavaScript development and system administration back in 2001, I think. Yeah, 2001, when Internet Explorer 5.5 was still a thing, and it was quite a torture, I would say, especially doing CSS for that beast. Since then, I've been a developer, a QA engineer, an engineering manager, a mentor, and now I'm a developer advocate, and I love what I'm doing. I'm also a quality enthusiast. What I believe is that our world deserves better products, better projects, better services. Because we in IT, we work for others. We produce something that people use, and it's quite sad when the systems don't work as expected. I think we should do better. I also love animals. I saved more than 50 dogs, I think, and some more cats. And there is my GitHub blog there. Just a tad more about me. I grew to become an engineering manager pretty much in every team where I worked as a developer. And this is my first team in 2006. And being an engineering manager means that I had to make my teams stable. By stable, I mean that sometimes people leave, sometimes people go on vacation, sometimes people just quit the job, sometimes something else happens. And yet the team has to be able to keep producing the product, to keep producing the changes. And this means that whenever someone leaves, there is a hole, there is a lack of knowledge, there is a gap of knowledge that needs to be somehow filled with a new person. And so in order for that gap to disappear, we need to teach that person somehow. We need to set an educational system for that. So I had to teach people. I had to teach people how to teach people as well, because many of my engineering managers who were mentees to me, they needed knowledge on how to teach people. And I believe that helping others is just awesome. I love teaching. I love being taught. It's just great. I had two projects involving pedagogical science. Pedagogy is a science of teaching kids, and andragogy is a science of teaching adults. Once I joined a company where I had this argument over a beer with a manager who said that he never believed that juniors could be taught, could be educated really quickly. He said that juniors were always an expense. Juniors were always not even an investment, but a waste of money, essentially. He preferred to hire middle developers or senior developers. And I told him, I bet my 1 month salary on this concept, on this experiment, that I can have 2 months educational program for just 6 developers, entry-level developers, those who barely coded, those who only learned some basics of Java. And so I set this experiment. He agreed to this bet. Yeah, it was fun. I set this experiment for 2 months in the office, full day, 8 hours a day. I was a student and 6 developers were students too. We had only 2 hours a day of attention and effort and presence of a good Java developer. So I studied Java with them. What we did, we worked on tasks. We just took tasks from Jira and all of us worked on them. We worked as a team in a mob session, mob context. So we had 1 computer for 6 of us, for 7 of us with me. And first task was a torture. We didn't understand a thing. Like, what does this public void static, this main thing is? I'm not sure. So we Googled, we explained it to each other. We wrote the first Hello World, we wrote the first piece of Spring something, I can't even remember, it was ages ago. Anyway, we studied it, and in 2 months, 5 of them were hired to that company as pre-middle developers. 5 only, because 1 left, he had a divorce in progress, and he said, just go away, work is not for me, I have divorce, have other things to care about. To me, it was a great commercial success and great ethical success. Great ethical success because I believed that I didn't fail those guys, and 1 girl. I think I did a good job with them. And commercial. So how we projected the salary increase for them was quite smart, I would say. So we thought that if within the year their level of expertise grows to a level that usual normal middle developers from the market have, their salary will not grow as much, even though we raise their salary every 3 months. So they were happy and the company was happy. So my project, this car project, was a good success. Another project I ran with junior developers was this shelter post. I used to live in Georgia, and the situation with dogs and cats and all the stray animals is just ridiculous there. People throw them away, people kill them, like it's very bad. And I met a woman. She owns a shelter, a non-commercial shelter, and she spends all her money on the shelter. And something clicked in my head, like this woman doesn't know how to do coding, this woman doesn't know how to run the computer, how to do anything. Like the laptop I gave her as a gift was her first laptop in her life. And I had junior developers. I'm always big in junior communities, and I picked 7 junior developers. And what we did, we worked in a remote environment, so everyone lived somewhere else in different places. We started gathering on Saturdays for 2 hours only, and working in a mob session too. So we had just one terminal, one person was presenting in Zoom, and everyone else was communicating what to do. No one knew how to write backend code, no one knew how to write front-end code. They studied some basics, but no one had any commercial experience, any experience at all. It was the best pet project of my own, I think. Then it was a good success, but then we decided that it became harder to keep doing synchronous work, so to keep meeting on Saturdays. And we moved from mobbing to asynchronous work, like GitHub issues, and someone picks the issue and does something with that. And it's stalled. The whole project is stalled. For me, the lesson is that synchronous work with mobbing works much better. Anyway, let's proceed. Yeah, so why here? Why am I here? First, Zalando is great. Thank you, Zalando. They offered me this amazing opportunity to host and run the meetup here. And second, when I was a mentor, I had to study pedagogy and andragogy a lot. And the first example of the great educational system with modern pedagogical approaches is the Finland educational system. And so I studied it a lot. And what I saw is that most of the problems that we have in IT now are very well solved in modern pedagogical environments. So why am I talking about learning? Like, how is QA and learning connected? Well, I believe that learning and being able to learn efficiently is the only way for us to do anything really efficiently. First, the world is changing all the time. That is why if we want to adopt what we learned from the world, we need to understand the world changes. And here's why Agile emerged. Like, we agreed that we should be learning all the time. We should have this feedback cycle. So we deploy something, we show it to the client, we learn from the client if the client likes it or not. If they do, well, good for us. And also our system is changing. By the system, I mean our whole software and hardware. Like, new machines are added to the data center, new code is added, or old code is changed. We need to keep on learning what is going on to our system. And that is why, at least I believe, TDD emerged as a concept. So if I'm writing tests before code, or even with automated tests, if I write tests after the code, I still explain to others what to expect of this code. So I still help them learn what my changes are and why they are there. Test management systems help there too. Like, if I'm creating a test strategy and then test runs and test cases and everything, I'm helping others learn how I test my code, how I test my functionality. So everything is changing all the time, and we need to learn efficiently. And good learning, as I've said, is well studied, well researched, and well practiced. two examples from my experience on the whole world of knowledge in pedagogy and andragogy there. Speech. Yeah. Another interesting point is quality circles. Does anyone know what quality circle is? Right. When Deming, the father of quality, he's called, came to Toyota in 1950 something, Toyota was in dire condition. They couldn't compete. They couldn't do anything. Now Toyota is the standard of quality for the cars. And actually, what's funny that Ford had to flee the Japanese market altogether because he couldn't compete there at all. So on the native soil of Japan, he couldn't compete with Toyota at all. And Toyota is outperforming pretty much any car producing company because their quality is better and prices are cheaper, lower. So when Ford management figured out that Toyota was doing so good and they are doing so bad, they launched this campaign, and this is the QR code for the study about that campaign. He called it After Japan campaign. He tried to copy the approaches from Toyota, and particular approach he tried to copy was quality circle. Quality circle is a very simple concept. You have people in your team, in your company, who are passionate about quality. You invite them to a regular 1 week to every 2 weeks, whatever, regular meetings where anyone and everyone can learn anything about your company and production process, can inquire how anything in your company is done, and suggest solutions, which are then implemented. What's interesting is that when Toyota were doing this, guys at Toyota were doing these quality circles, they focused. So the main objective of quality circle in Toyota was learning. They said there is no KPIs, there is no OKRs, there is no nothing, just learning. You are here to learn about the process, about the materials, about people, about anything. And Toyota facilitated constant learning within this approach of quality circles. Ford failed to copy that. Ford said there will be KPI on quality improvements. It didn't work. And that is why he left the Japanese market. Yeah, as you possibly understood already, I'm talking about pedagogy and andragogy, a science of teaching kids and adults, and I apply it to QA and development. Why pedagogy? Why not kids? Well, the reason is that pedagogy is the oldest science of knowledge management, of how to teach people. And andragogy is like an applied version of pedagogy. It's like, okay, we know it works for kids really well. We somewhat change it, knowing that adults are a bit different, like motivation is different, and certain things are different. Kids are not paid to learn, grown-ups are paid to work, etc. But the main principles are still there. And I just want to review a few practices and together with you. First, as I've said, when I'm a manager or when I'm a specialist in the team who is invited to be an interviewer, what the goal of the interview is for me is to learn what the candidate can do. We don't want to learn what they know. We want to learn what they can do. That's the main thing. What we usually do, we just ask questions. That's the most common approach to an interview. Sometimes we suggest some take-home exercises, and then we review what the results are. My thesis, which is based on pedagogical knowledge, is that neither of these approaches work well according to objective. So if we just ask questions, we get some information back. Only some, because the person might be stressed, because everyone perceives interviews as a stressful situation. That's one place where the noise is added to the information we receive. But also, it is just the knowledge. I saw people who can learn things by heart, but they can't do anything. Like, I do leathercraft as a hobby, and I watched thousands of videos on YouTube how to do certain things with leather. Can I do it well? No. I have to practice and practice and practice in order to obtain this skill. So the skill is how I apply my knowledge to the materials. So if anyone can ask me questions about leather, I will answer them well. I'm not a good leathercraft person at all. I'm just starting. And so with take-home exercises, what's wrong with them? First, they usually have deadlines, and they usually are usually given to a single person. We work always as teams. We always have help from others, and we are always diverse. So like, I might be very different from Maret or from Breezy. We all are different. And yet, if we are in a team, we improve the whole team performance by having some strength, and others cover our weaknesses. So if someone does the take-home exercise alone, it's not showing that much. What can be done instead? What Finnish educational system has? First, they focus kids on socialization so that kids learn to work in teams. Also, they have this approach of giving real problems to kids to study. Not some synthetic tasks, but real problems to study. And also the atmosphere, from what I've read, once again, this is interesting, I've only read things about Finnish system, I've not been there, so my knowledge is limited. But yes, what Finnish teachers say that they aim to create such an atmosphere that everyone is involved and everyone tries to collaborate. How it can be mapped to our reality? We can do paid, pair, or mob work for our candidates. I ran this a few times and it worked out really, really well. So when I have a candidate, I suggest to them that we can work together with you for a day or two on a real task from Jira, on a real user story, and you will get all the help needed from me, and we will just work on one machine. I've never done mob work like that. I've never done mob interview like that, but it can be done too. Pair interview showed just great results. I knew within 5 hours that this person is a good fit or isn't a good fit, because the person was showing the skills, not just the knowledge. We're working on something together. And there was little stress, because when you do pairing, you change all the time. And the person sees that you are also a human being, you have mistakes, you have errors, and that you are not some superhuman who knows all the answers, which removes the stress or makes it less powerful. Another thing, so as soon as you hired, these are Dogos doing onboarding. As soon as you hired someone, you want that person to be as productive as possible, as quickly as possible. That's the objective. We want the person to learn our system quickly. What we usually do, we usually provide some documentation, go read it. We usually provide some mentor or a buddy, someone who is there if you want to ask him questions. And sometimes we do exams after the probation period, after the onboarding period. How well did you study what we gave you? There are issues with that as well from the pedagogical standpoint. First, that reading isn't best for learning. Watching YouTube videos isn't best for learning too. Practicing something is much better. And also fear, when you have exams, you have fear. People don't like exams. People don't like to be checked. And when onboarding has an exam, people might fear that they fail the exam, even though they might be a great fit for the company, just because they know much more in some different area. And also, when you have exams, usually they are well standardized. So you have like a set of checks for the person, maybe questions, maybe something else. And standardization doesn't cover the diversity that people have. People are very different and no one can be standardized. So what Finnish system does, they have very little standardization. This means that, as I've read, that in Finnish system, there are very little exams and very little grades. People are not graded all the time. People are not checked using standard exams all the time. There are some exams, but not many compared to other educational systems. And also, a Finnish educational system has a concept of group learning where you sit with others and you try to understand and comprehend and work on a single problem together. So what I had a few times is a concept of pair onboarding. So as soon as the interview is done, we do pair onboarding. So I just put the person with a mentor, but they work in a pair mode on a single task. And this makes onboarding much, much faster. And this is one of my favorites. I really think that this practice isn't as good as the community thinks it is. We, by the way, share this attitude to code reviews with you, Marat. So what is the purpose and the objective of a classical pull request-based code review? Is that we want to understand, if I'm the reviewer, I want to understand the changes that the person did to the code, to the system. I want to learn the changes. And possibly I want to change those changes. Possibly I want to tell the person that, you know what, something is a bit off, please change your changes. So it's a mutual process. I learn from the person, from the change, by reading the changes. And the person might also learn from me if I'm more experienced, or if I learn this module better, or this system or subsystem better. So what is the, usually we have reading and commenting and the whole code review done when the code is completed. And also it's pretty much always asynchronous. So Marat compiles the code or produces the code, and I then go and review the code in an asynchronous way. What is the problem from the pedagogical standpoint of this approach? First is that there is too little time. So when there is a user story or requirements, anything that you are to build, you build it, you give it to me to review. I have to understand, in order to understand your changes properly, in order to learn your changes properly, I need to understand the requirements first. I need to compile my own understanding of how I would approach building a software, building a feature that would satisfy those requirements. And then I would compare how I approach this with how the reviewee approached that. In my experience, really, really thorough code reviews take pretty much the same time that the development takes. But also there is a delay, of course. In most cases, in most companies, review time is much smaller than the development time, meaning that the reviewer is not doing the same type of work that the reviewee did, meaning that the reviewer cannot possibly learn the same that the reviewee did. And also, it's usually too late. When I've done something, I've produced code, I've invested effort into doing that. And when we invest effort, we learn certain things. So like when I did some few years of boxing, and we had people who fought in the streets and then came to boxing, and they were the hardest to teach because they learned how to do certain moves in a bad way, in a not an official way, not efficient way. And this means that when the person invests some effort into building something, it is harder to teach the person to do it right. So what can be done instead? Instead, we can do work-in-progress code reviews, like every couple of hours, sit with a person and see what they're doing. Or we can even become a pair and do pair programming together. If we do pair programming together, we're constantly reviewing each other. And we don't learn how to do things in a bad way, in a non-optimal way anyway. And once again, in Finnish educational system, group learning is praised all the time, and little homework is given to people, simply because a teacher cannot learn how the student understood something by looking at the homework. It is not that easy. It is much easier for teacher to learn what the person understood if the teacher sees how the person applies those skills that they learned. Oops. Yeah, requirements testing. Does anyone do requirements testing? Raise your hands. Yeah. Yeah, some people do. So the purpose of requirements testing is that we want to understand what is required or desired from us, and we need to formulate what we learned. So whenever requirements testing is done, we come up with something. We reformulate them, we ask questions, so we clarify it, we enhance the requirements somehow. So how it's usually done, from what I've seen, from what my experience is, that QA, a single engineer, reads and confirms, reads the code, understands the, not the code, the requirements, understands it and clarifies with product and developers. Sometimes it's done synchronously, right, with like all together with products, but quite often it's done asynchronously. So the product brings something, the QA engineer reviews it, comes back to the product, and every asynchronous step adds a delay. I've seen stages like, so product brings a feature to development, then QA starts reviewing the feature, let's say in a day, comes back to the products in another day. So a couple of days is just in the wait time. And delays are not optimal for us. We want to move faster. That's why Agile, that's why pretty much everything. And also, when I am looking at something that I might not understand fully, I think that is a characteristic of high uncertainty. I do not fully understand what I am to do. And when there is higher uncertainty, it means the problem is harder for us. And when the problem is harder for us, it's better to work in a group, or at least in a pair on that problem. Whenever there is something that is hard for you to understand, to learn, it's better to work in a group. Every single scientific study is now done by teams. From the 1950s, the growth of scientific research, the progress of scientific research is done only by teams of scientists. It's never a lonely task. Exploratory testing. There is a QR code to HBLaw. What is HBLaw? HBLaw says that for us to be able to manage a system with certain variety, we have to have a high variety. So it means that we must understand the system better to be able, like really well, to be able to operate it. And so when we do the exploratory testing, the goal for us is to relearn the system. We have test cases in our TMS, we have automated tests, we have unit tests, we have plenty of stuff, but we want to relearn it. The exploration phase means that we abandon everything we knew about the system and we start learning the system with a fresh eye. And usually it's done by a single QA, unfortunately. I saw sometimes people do it in groups. I love it. Because in this scenario, the uncertainty is not that high, but the more diversity we have, diversity of perspective, diversity of knowledge, the better we see our system. So maybe, I could forget about accessibility issues, and someone could bring, oh, Vitaly, you forgot about accessibility. Let's check what's going to happen in our system if we do this and that. So when the diversity is higher, we get a better result of relearning something. And in the Finnish educational system, kids are given classes in art, music, cooking, carpentry, metalwork, textiles, a lot of other areas, just to enhance the diversity of knowledge in those, in the kids. Why? Yeah. And chaos testing, another practice. Does anyone do chaos testing? Chaos testing, anyone? Chaos testing, it's super cool. Like, we have scripted testing, which is normal testing, unit tests, automated tests, tests manual from the TMS or whatever. We have unscripted testing, which is exploratory testing, we just go off script. And we have chaos testing, where we relearn the system by breaking it. So we come up with fancy scenarios on what might happen to the system if, let's say, our data center with our backend dies, or what happens with the system if our database dies, or if our backups don't work. Like, we destroy the system in a controlled way, let's say, to see what happens to it, to see where we might need to add some more resilience to the system. And it's this approach demands even more diversity. Like, we need to be creative in order to learn about AI, but AI brings, like, it's trained on so much data that if you ask AI, what would be your approach of breaking the system that we have, and first you have to describe the system to AI, of course, then AI will give you some more diversity than you can even imagine. And then, of course, you, the human beings, have to review what the AI proposed to you. It's always better to break things together. It's just more fun and it's just more optimal. So, to summarize, the harder the learning activity is, the harder the learning process is, the harder the topic is, the brighter collaboration shines. When it's really hard to learn something, or when the things change a lot, it's always cool to learn it together. When everyone is included, there is less fear. Like if I have a team of 7 people doing the learning process with me, I'm less afraid that I'm stupid, because everyone will show that they don't know something, and that's all right. We'll have some lacks of knowledge, and that's okay. And less fear means more creativity. Like in brainstorm meetings, usually people specifically facilitate the brainstorm meetings in a way that they say, any idea is welcome, even if it's completely crazy, just bring up anything. So brainstorm meetings are designed to provide more creativity by reducing fear. And so when you have a team working on something, learning something, this less fear brings more creativity. And more viewpoints of different people brings more diversity, which in turn brings more creativity. With less standardization, less standard onboarding process, less standard interview process, less standard testing process, you can have more interest of people. Anyone who worked with exploratory testing, anyone who did exploratory testing, I think everyone will say that it was more interesting than usual scripted testing. And yeah, another thing is that less grades. As soon as you start grading people on anything, on knowledge, on skills, you create stress, because people don't like to be graded, that's one thing. And also it's very hard to grade someone based on some standard approach. And the last one, less reading, more practice. I have this very provocative thesis that if you have extensive documentation, there is some problem with the design. Because if someone needs to read docs just to operate with your system, maybe, just maybe, you could have made it easier to work with in the first place. And yes, I must say that pairing and mobbing isn't a silver bullet. There is always limit to applicability to every practice. It can't be a silver bullet. And solo work, individual work, is good for well-scripted things. Like if you have a test run, you don't need 2 people to do this test run, to run each test case.
But you optimize it away with a pair.
Yes, very true, yeah. But then to optimize, you relearn or you change it. But in order just to run it, it's okay to do it on your own. But then, if you're doing it on your own all the time, maybe you can automate it. Like the 3rd time you're running the manual test on your own, maybe it's worthy purely from the economical standpoint to automate it. And yet, test management systems help here. Like if you see that you're spending too much time on the same test run, well, maybe it's better to talk to developers to automate it. Thank you. And that's my LinkedIn and the newsletter we are offering with my colleague. And that is it.